All right, so we might have started a few minutes late, but they gave me an extra half an hour, so we'll be here for about an hour. Is that okay with everybody? All right, just kidding. So for those of you who don't know who we are, we're passiveinvesting.com. I'm one of the managing partners at passiveinvesting.com, and we raise private equity from retail investors. Up to this point, we haven't raised any money from institutional providers. All of it has been private retail investors, and average investment is around $127,000 across our 1,700 plus active investors in our deals. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I am married with 4 children under 12. So we live in Columbia, South Carolina. How many of you have ever been to Columbia? A few of you, okay, that's good. So in Columbia, we actually right now don't currently own any assets in Columbia. We don't invest there just yet. There's a few assets that we have looked at, but most of our assets are across other primary markets in the Southeast as well as in Texas. We have just over $1 billion in real estate assets that we've acquired since 2018. And to give you, I don't know if I have this slide on here, I probably don't, but when we first started in 2018, we started and raised just over $4 million. And it was probably the hardest $4 million we ever raised. And so we had to put into a process in place to allow us to be able to raise a significant amount of capital. And so what we're going to go over today is some of our kind of mindset and our philosophy behind how to properly manage investors to be able to help you. And since 2018, that first year of $4 million, in 2019 we raised $32 million. In 2020 we raised $61 million, even during the middle of COVID. And last year we raised just over $196 million from our private investors. So that's just a little bit about our kind of background as far as that. As you can see there on the screen, my wife and I are also private LP investors in other deals. So we've invested with about 17 different operators, and it's actually close to about 60 syndications as an LP. So we have a lot of experience from a passive perspective, but also from an active perspective. One of the reasons why I like to invest with other groups is because when we invest with other people, we get to see their process, right? And we can learn things about what we want to be doing, and a lot of times we learn about things that we don't want to be doing, right? And so we also want to make sure that we're interacting with our investors on a regular basis to get their feedback to figure out what they're looking for in a GP. In my session this afternoon, if you guys are interested, I'm going to be going through the 7 red flags for passive real estate investing that my wife and I put together after investing in these various syndications as an LP. I also have a background in business. I have a group of non-surgical orthopedic medical clinics located in South Carolina. And my wife and I still own those. We started them from scratch, still own those 100%. And that's really what got us into real estate, is the medical clinics were doing really well. They were cash flowing, and it caused a problem. Anybody know what that problem was? Taxes, right? We were paying really large 6-figure checks to the government, not once a year, but every quarter, right? You get these quarterly hits to kind of remind you about Uncle Sam. And we were tired of doing that. And so I stepped out of the day-to-day full-time operations of the clinics to be able to focus on real estate. Started as an LP investor first, moved into the GP position, and then also merged with our 2 other managing partners. One of them that's here today, got Brandon Abbott down there in the corner, and then Danny Randazza, who is not with us today right now. Last thing there is the multifamily investor nation. How many of you have ever been on one of our webinars or heard us on the MFIN Summit or anything like that? Good, awesome. So right now we have just over 45,000 members that are part of that collective network of investors across the country. We also have another one that we started since we're now into the self-storage space called the Storage Investor Nation. And of course, as you guys have probably heard earlier from some of our team, we're also moving into the hotel space and also express car wash space as well. All right, so one of the things I want to go over with you today is something that'll hopefully shift your mind just a little bit, okay? So what I want you to do is make sure you have a piece of paper in front of you and or you have something to draw on. So get out your piece of paper, get out your pad. I'm going to go over this process with you. I want you to be able to fully understand this so you can kind of put into your head some ideas and some thoughts about raising capital and how to really interact with your investors. So on your piece of paper, I want you to draw this triangle. It's a big triangle just like that. You don't have to shade it in or color it in. In the middle of the triangle, I want you to put the word investor triad. And on the top of this investor triad triangle, what I want you to do is put the word no at the top. I want you to put the word like on the bottom left, and then trust on the bottom right. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question here. I want to poll everybody to kind of see. Of these three things, know, like, and trust, I want you to think in your head about which one is the most important that you should initially be focusing on. Know, like, and trust. So I'm going to do a poll, and everybody participate with this, because most of you will probably be wrong. So your neighbor will probably be wrong. How many of you would say, raise your hand, that having people trust you is the most important thing? Raise your hand. Trust. Okay? What about like? And what about no? And how many of you really don't really know, right? Or just don't want to raise your hand? So the most important piece here is this knowing aspect of who you are. Well, a lot of times we think, oh, let's focus on getting people to trust me. Let's get them to like me. But guess what? They never, ever get an opportunity to actually make an opinion as to whether or not they like or trust you if they never actually know who you are. So when you get to the point of getting people to know who you are, what do you have to do? You have to do something that will allow you to be able to stand out from the crowd. I love doing that every time. I love it. All right, so you got to figure out ways to stand out from the crowd, right? There's a lot of people in here. A lot of people in here are active operators that are trying to close multifamily deals, self-storage deals, hotels, whatever the asset class may be. And you've got to figure out what you're going to do to be able to stand out from the crowd, okay? And we're not going to go through a lot of those strategies today about how to stand out from the crowd, but when you're putting together your process, you need to make sure that you're thinking about what can you do that can be something different than somebody else. And I'll tell you a key right now about if you could write anything down from this weekend about how you can improve your investor relations process, one word. Anybody think of it? And this is something that we pull our investors on. We have investor dinners that we have across the country with our investors because we want to have a relationship with them. So we sit down with them, we share a meal with them, and we're not there to pitch them anything, we're just there to enjoy the conversation and fellowship. But one of the things we do ask them to go around the table is to introduce themselves and tell us why they continue to invest with passiveinvesting.com if they've invested in multiple deals. One of our most recent deals that we closed out of Fort Myers, Florida, it's a $109 million acquisition, raised $38 million for it. 81% of those investors were repeat investors. And that's really powerful to be able to show other investors that we have investors that have invested with us over and over and over and over again. And I'll tell you the number one thing at these investor dinners, it goes down to one word. Anybody know what that is? How many of you have ever been in a deal where the operator stopped communicating with you? Or an operator wouldn't communicate with you very fast? Or they wouldn't consistently update you with the performance of the property? Communication is the number one thing in the investor relations process that you should focus on. And we're going to be talking about here in just a moment with this investor triad. It's all about communication and how can you be a more effective communicator. So of this know, like, and trust, we talked about it already. You got to get people to know us. After they know us, now they are going to start to like us, right? Now, there will be a certain subset of people that once they get to know you, they're out. They don't want to have any part of you. And that's okay. You can't please everybody. As a matter of fact, if you are pleasing everybody, you're probably doing something wrong, right? You need to be able to be a little bit polarizing to be able to have a certain number of people that actually don't want to follow you, right? Most of you in here right now have already made a decision within the first 30 seconds of me talking as to whether or not you want to continue to listen to me, right? For those of you who are on your phones, I understand, right? It's okay. But once they actually get to know you, they now start to like you, hopefully, right? They're starting down that process, and you're going to, now that they're in your fold, or let's call it a fence, they're around your fence, right? Those are your hopeful and prospective investors. Once you have them around your fence, you need to make sure that you do things to keep them as close to you as possible, right? And one of those things that you can do is obviously making sure that you have phone calls with all of your new leads that come in, right? When we first started with leads, we were only getting maybe 5 to 10, maybe 15 a month if we were lucky. Then we started putting content together, and the content started to build on top of the other content. And now, usually every 30 days, we have a dashboard in our active campaign software that we use, and it tells us our rolling 30 days of new leads that come in. And we're sitting at usually around 325 to about 400 new investor leads every single month, which is why we have a large, robust investor relations team, because I can't do all those phone calls, right? Once you start getting a lot of leads in, you have to make sure that you have a really good, strong team behind you to support you. But once you start to generate that content, the more and more people listen to your content and follow you, now they're going to go over to this phase of trust. Once they get over to this trust phase, guess what actually now starts to happen? They start to invest with you. Because they're now following you enough, and they know that you're a good operator from them following you. And some investors, it only takes a few weeks. Some investors, it takes a couple years. We've had investors now that have been following us for the last 2 or 3 years, and they call us up and they say, I'm ready. I've been following you. I've been digesting your content. Everybody has a different point in time where they will actually be able to make a decision as to whether or not they want to invest with you. But once they get to this trust phase, that's when they start to wire you money to be able to close a deal, right? Now, once they get to this trust phase, and you actually can now perform on what you said you were going to do, you're actually going to give them the property updates when they want them. You're going to execute the business plan, and you're going to do it successfully so you can continue the distributions like you had projected. All those things are important, because guess what happens? Now we go from trust up to know. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, if they already know me, how can they go from trust back up to know? And it's because of referrals. Once you start getting referrals, it's a snowball effect. And that you're only going to get referrals, especially in this kind of a finance space, if you are actually performing the way the investors were originally projected. And if they're not, you're at least communicating that, right? Because I'm in, like I said, almost 60 LP deals. Are all of them doing well? No, they're not. But some of the operators are actually telling me that why it's not performing well and what they're doing to make sure it does perform well at the end. And there are some that aren't communicating with me. And do you think I'm going to invest with them again? No, right? I actually have had investors that have said to us that they're not going to invest with an operator, even though full cycle the deal did really well, but because of the poor communication throughout the deal, they decided not to. All right. The next thing here about referrals is that they actually jump the like phase. Because they are referred to us by somebody, it allows them to be able to have that built-in trust to be able to jump that step, right? And we've had investors that will call us up, first time we've been introduced to them, but they were introduced by somebody that already invested with us, and they invest with us right away. There's no courting phase or anything like that throughout that process. All right, so this is the investor triad, and hopefully that helps kind of shift your mindset a little bit about what you're trying to focus on. And we're going to go into a 5-step process that we have to be able to have a process in place to manage our investors effectively. So the first one, if you want to write this down, is raising capital. Now, I have a different idea on raising capital. I don't feel like raising capital, in my definition, is me going out and finding you and you saying, yes, you want to invest, and you invest, right? That's actually a multi-step process. the initial step of raising capital is really kind of a misnomer. It really should be raising awareness, right? Getting people to be filling into the top of your funnel of leads that are coming in so that you now have people to reach out to, and they're now part of your inner circle, if you will, okay? And this right here, if you look at the top right-hand corner, you'll see I put the investor triad up there. As we're going throughout this, I'm going to put numbers on the investor triad so you know exactly where we are in the process. Is that for me? Thank you, sir. Oh, perfect. We flew up a few days earlier with our wives, and they're up there in Vail, and that high altitude really gets you. I don't know how many of you in here like really thirsty, you like walk like 5 steps and you're out of breath. It's like really crazy. Thanks, Ben, for having it here in Denver. No. Anyway, all right, so on the top here, we're going to write the number 1. Because really, this raising capital phase and raising awareness is what? It's the initial step in that process, getting people to know who you are, okay? Now, again, I'm limited with time. I got like 8.5 minutes left. I could go into a whole lot more detail on a lot of these different categories and break them down even further. We do that on our weekly webinars that we do every week. So if you want to go onto our YouTube channel and find out more information, you can certainly do that. But the first step in this process is raising capital. That's getting people to know who you are. It's getting people to put eyeballs on you so they can either make a decision as to whether or not they want to continue to follow you or not, okay? This is starting a YouTube channel, a podcast, being interviewed on other podcasts. This could be going to local meetups in your area and finding people. One of the things that I like to do is try to find venues where we are the only person in the room looking for investors. Because you go to like local RIA groups and meetups and stuff like that, and everybody's looking for investors, right? And then when one walks through the door, it's like a fat rat on a Cheeto. Boom, right? They're all right there trying to pounce on that investor. And that's what happens. And so trying to think outside of the box. And one thing that I've done recently is I try to be interviewed on podcasts around just business in general instead of being real estate. Because I know other business owners have money and they want to invest. And so even though that podcast might not be on investing, it might be on how to improve your marketing or whatever, then you can provide information to an audience that doesn't normally get to hear you. And that's that raising capital phase. The next phase is the courting phase. This is where you're going to be doing content generation. This is going to be down here next to the like. And the courting phase is really where you're wanting the investor to hear more and more and more from you and get in front of them more and more and more so that they can continue to develop their trust, right? Because right now they just kind of like you. Have you ever met somebody and you're like, I think I could like that person, but then you got to spend a little more time with them to figure out if they're actually, somebody you want to hang around with a lot more, right? And that's really what this phase is. It's all about the courting phase, about trying to get the investors to know who you are by generating a ton of content. Now, when it comes to this content phase, one of the challenges that most new operators have is they don't really know where to start. How many of you are in that phase right now where you need to raise some capital to close a deal, whether you have it under contract or not, and you got to figure out, how am I going to get investors in front of me? Nobody? Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so one of the challenging pieces is trying to figure out where to start. Where you should start is where you enjoy, is what you enjoy to do most. So if you like to write, what should you do? Write blog articles, write a book, be a guest author for somebody else, write a newsletter to your investors. If you like to be in front of video, start a YouTube channel. If you like to hear yourself talk, start a podcast, be interviewed by other people, right? But here's the thing. A lot of times we can sit back here and some of you might be thinking, well, I'd like to do all of those things, but you have to start somewhere. So starting with just one, we didn't start with everything that we have right now today. We started with one thing, and as we continued to perfect that, we built on and did another thing, and another, and another. And it creates a consistent flow of new investors coming and hearing about you when you have a process in place that allows them to see you in multiple different areas, right? And so you want to make sure during this courting phase that you have an idea as to what you want to do, and you start with something. And the thing is once you start with that second thing, don't stop doing the first thing. You have to continue on and just build up on top of the other. And it's really important because your investors want to see consistency. So they see you start a podcast, and then 6 months later you decide to stop it. You do something different. There's going to be some confusion there. Plus, you're going to probably tick off all the people that you interviewed that are no longer have any content out there because you took down the podcast, right? And you just kind of wasted their time, if you will. But you want to make sure that you start with something. And there's a phrase that a good mentor of mine years ago told me, which has really helped me put a fire under me when I'm trying to start something, is he said, version 1 is always better than version none. It doesn't mean we can't have a version 2.0 or a 1.1 or a 1.2, but you got to get version 1.0 out there. You got to get started. So version 1 is always going to be better than version none, right? So make sure that that's something that you should write down as well, because that's a phrase that has helped me in a lot of different areas where we have been able to implement something right away and then perfect it along the way as well. All right, this third phase, which is securing capital, is more or less the phase where you're actually asking for the money, right? You've already got these investors in step 1 to actually come to you, and now in step 3, we're actually asking them for money after we have courted them, right? After they've already seen some of our content, after we've had phone calls with them, after we've actually had a lot of interaction with them. Now we're in this phase of being able to secure capital and secure it in a very big way, right? So securing capital goes actually on just near trust is where it goes. Because once they actually trust you, that's when they're going to be able to allow you to secure capital from them, okay? So is everybody clear on the difference between raising capital and securing capital? There's two different layers there. Now, after you've secured capital, what do you think is next? You've closed the deal, and now you have ongoing communications. This is important that you educate your investors on what to expect from those communications, and that you actually send out those communications when you tell them you're going to send them out. In our group, every deal we have an investor in, every investor receives an update from us by the 14th of every month. It's the 14th. They get it every month by the 14th. Okay? I think in the last 3 or 4 years, we maybe missed that once or twice. And it was because either fell on a holiday or a weekend or something like that, and we sent it out the next business day. But we're very consistent with it, right? When we tell our investors that we're going to get your scheduled K-1s on time, we're going to get that done. Right, Tal? She's our director of finance, so it's her responsibility to make sure it gets done. Otherwise, on March 15th, she's got to find another job, I mean, no pressure at all. This is going to go on the other side of trust, because this is when they've already sent you money, you've secured that capital, and you're ready to go. And the last one here is referrals. We talked about that, right? Referrals, of course, goes right on the other side of that triangle there. And once you start to get referrals, you really can realize how effective your machine is that you are building. Because when investors come up to you and they want to refer their family members, their friends, their coworkers, that's a lot of trust. When they bring a friend in to say, hey, you should put $100,000 with this group, that's a lot of trust that somebody has to have in their friend to be able to actually just wire money for a deal because they recommended it, okay? But referrals, if you're not getting referrals, you need to look at this process. Something's broken. But if you're starting to get a lot of referrals, you're probably doing something right, okay? How many of you really enjoyed that band that came through here? It's a lot of fun, wasn't it? Well, I'll give you a little bit of a treat of it at the end as well when I'm leaving. If you want to connect with me further, I know it's kind of an abrupt stop here, but I got like less than a minute left. But if you want to connect with me further on LinkedIn to follow some of my content, you can certainly do that. Just take a picture of that, and don't take a picture, but use your phone, and it'll link you straight to my LinkedIn profile. And then we can connect up further. And if you have any more questions for me, I'll be hanging around the rest of the day today until my afternoon session, and then I'll also be over here at the booth as well.